So Gail, we're here for your post-conference, based on the lesson that you did, that I observed a couple of weeks ago now. So what we're going to go over is the post-observation questions that are in Randa that you've gone ahead and filled out, and then just have some discussion about what were some things that you also asked me to look for as part of my observation. And the notes I know you have that I took and that the, you know, the coding and stuff that I did. But so what was successful about this lesson? So, and actually before I even go there, the lesson was on you have your 8th grade group getting ready to work through this Holocaust unit. You wanted to focus on what good readers do and specifically talk about direct and indirect characterization. Okay, so.
I think I'll start off with what didn't go well.
Okay, that works
just
too.
because it was that computer thing. My
Yeah.
computer's not, I mean, it needs to be re-imaged, but I had the cutest little video on that steel method that I was
Right.
using. And you think it would play? Well, at least I could get it up with that class. With the next class, by then the computer completely blacked out. But on the flip side of that, the good thing is I actually used that, got it going and didn't shut it down, just had it running. And used it the next day as kind of a review of what I did that day.
Okay.
So, and that worked fine. And I think I had too much for that first lesson anyway, so it was probably best it didn't work.
Okay.
So that was what didn't work. Some things.
Technology's great when it works.
When it works, exactly. And all I could think of was I was cursed because of yours not working.
Yeah.
At the time you were trying to get it going.
Yeah.
I was really pleased. I think what went well and made me, because you were in there, I guess I was maybe more cognizant of the kids and their behavior. But I've worked so hard with that group, and that's why I wanted you to come and look at them, because they've been the most difficult group to get settled and to get them where they are. And it was like when I went home and started reflecting about that lesson, it was like, wow, you know, they really are stepping up right now to what's happening within the classroom. I've had a lot of discussions with them, which you wouldn't have seen, but about what are people's perceptions if they come in and we're studying the Holocaust and you're laughing. Like, what's the perception of that? So we've had a lot of discussions about that and about maturity. And I've moved the seats. I mean, I'm like constantly moving seats around, and I really feel like I've got them where they're sitting right now for when it's direct instruction and explicit instruction like that. I feel like that's a good working arrangement, but it's really taken a half a year to kind of figure that out. A lot of that, I think, is because I mentioned that there's a lot of absences in there. We've had new kids, and that seems to be the group that they've come into. So that group really hadn't gelled as a group, and I think they're doing that now. So I felt good about that.
Well, and I recognized in my notes, because that was something you had asked me about too, was, you know, the engagement, they were facing you, they were, you know, there was that answering back and forth when you were prompting, and I think there was only one girl that I noticed who was reading in her lap. But honestly, she also looked up at appropriate times, so unless you made your move at that point, which you weren't because you were delivering the instruction, so you weren't necessarily going around the room at that time. But she wasn't distracting anyone else, and she certainly wasn't not listening. I'm just not sure she was listening that 100% because she was, you know.
But no, she wasn't, because when I checked their, when they did their charts for me the next day in their independent work, she didn't get that at all. And it's funny because she's one that has not been getting her work done, and I mentioned kids' lack of effort and engagement in there, and she's one. And I did have her down front, and she was kind of back to me. She was in that section that really didn't face me. So when I made the moves, I specifically put her up back so I could see her face, because I'm at the back of the room a lot, so I could keep a closer handle on her.
Right.
So that's funny that I didn't see her.
No.
You know, and like I said,
she was good.
She was good about it. So, some things that I think also went well for them. They do need time to talk. They're a talkative group, but I find that, like when they did the guided practice, I had them do it with an elbow partner. That works best for them, because if I let them up to move, they just lose all kinds of time, and they all get off task, and they all get to talking. So I will eventually release them to more of that, like pick your elbow partner eventually. But right now they're just getting to the point where they're working well in this setting. So I thought that went well with them.
And it's good that you are recognizing that you're trying to squeeze as much time as you can, and those transitions and those kinds of things can really, in the course of a lesson or the course of a week, eat away at some of that. So that's, you know, that's one of those teaching moves that you've made in recognition of that, but
And-
also giving them some choice.
And that class is shorter, just because of getting there in the morning. Some kids come in late,
Right.
getting attendance done for
First
my
period,
homeroom and
yeah.
that whole kind of thing. And that's why I have them do that reading, which I started thinking the other day, that's going really well. They
Mhm.
all come in, for a while, they would have a book and they
Mhm.
would just have grabbed it. They
Mhm.
weren't engaged in it in
Mhm.
any way, and now they're sitting there, and I can see they're reading, and they'll have the same book day after day. So I feel good about that, and
Yeah.
it might be 5 minutes, or it might be 10 minutes.
Mhm.
So I think that's really helped them to settle.
So the engagement at that point then is now kind of bleeding into what you're
When it's
seeing
time
for
to start.
engagement when it's time to start. It's making even that transition
Yep.
more seamless.
Yep,
So that you
because-
can start on time or start at the time that you need to, but not worry about that being a
Mhm.
big deal as
Yep.
far as transitioning.
And I'm glad you said that, because I do notice now when I'll say, okay, I'm ready to start now, they'll just close their books up.
Yeah.
They won't get up and go to put them back on a shelf, they'll wait until the end of the class time. So that went well. The lesson itself, I felt like
Yeah, did they learn what you intended for them to
Yep.
learn?
Some did.
Yep.
They did to a degree. I felt like with the explicit instruction, and I knew that was going to take longer because that book was longer.
Mhm.
I chose that because it had to do with the Holocaust. I questioned, and this is down later, probably another question, but I felt like I probably should have stopped halfway through, but they're also, knowing those kids, they wouldn't have let it go.
Yeah.
They would have
Right.
wanted, some kids, or some groups I could have stopped it with, so that went okay.
Mhm.
The guided practice went fine for them, but that was pretty simplistic. It was examples of
Mhm.
which part of the steel is
Right.
this? Is it speech? Is it thoughts? Is it whatever? They did really well on that, and there was just 4 of them to do. They did it with an elbow partner. It was quick. And they did well on that, and
Mhm.
I can't remember, I'm looking through them, I think there was like maybe 90% of them really
Yeah.
had that down.
Okay.
And I also asked them at the end to explain to me, flip it over and on the back of their paper to write what they learned about direct and indirect characterization, and they actually told me a lot. That had to be my exit slip because I ran out of time.
Yeah.
So I chose, as I was going through, I'm thinking, I'm not gonna get through this, so I stopped after that point for that lesson. But then I went on the next day with the independent practice.
Independent, yeah.
I think that, like I said, that part of it went well. When it came to the independent practice, where they really had to read a longer passage,
Mhm. They fell down a
they
little bit.
fell down.
Yeah.
So what I did, and I have them here, I sorted their work out,
Mhm.
and I have 2 that really know it.
Mhm.
I mean, they just have it. And then the mass of them still need some more work on specific things, like the effect on other characters. Then there was a couple
Mhm.
that didn't get it, and that girl was one of them.
Yeah.
So I've pulled them, and I've made some little groups for guided reading groups to pull and redo that stuff.
For reteaching.
Over it again.
Okay. So if you had a chance to teach the lesson again, would you do anything differently?
Well, I
Yeah,
keep
plan-
thinking, I don't know if I would change that book or have it just stop where we did. It seemed that was like a natural stop, and it seemed to work well.
Mhm.
And it worked so well, I did it with the next groups. I could have probably gotten further with one of my groups, but
Mhm.
I didn't. I just stopped it there, and then did the independent the next day, so.
Okay. And you mentioned that the students who struggled, you were able to kind of gather that from
Mhm.
the evidence that you collected. And it sounds like you're planning to do some reteaching
Mhm.
and the
Yeah.
small group, the guided reading, but also that guided instruction.
Mhm.
So that
Yeah.
you're sure that that's something that they're gonna be able to walk away with a better understanding of.
Yeah, because I think
Um,
some of them just need a little more practice, and
Yeah.
maybe me to have them be more specific on a couple of things. But there were, like I said, a couple that really, they didn't
Yeah.
get it.
I mean, I think that's great that it's an awareness, I think, as teachers too, we sometimes, I mean, because of our time, we feel like it's a one and done
Mhm.
feeling, and kids, and so recognizing that practice, we all get better with practice,
Yep.
so they need that, especially if they've struggled with it initially.
Mhm.
So thinking about next steps for continuous improvement, or any supports that you're needed from me, or anything in terms
No,
of
it
moving
seems
forward?
to be time on that issue. It always comes back to that time thing, Angela.
It's so frustrating.
And I don't know, I don't know if maybe first period, if I had my higher group of kids, but I know they're in
Well-
math, because that is the prime time to probably get some of them.
Right.
They would settle down quicker, they would get stuff done quicker, so,
But it sounds like you've implemented some things that maybe now you can make up some of the time.
yeah.
You feel like maybe you lost at the
Mhm.
beginning of the year. Some of these, and I keep saying moves, they're, they're teaching moves, they're, student moves that you've implemented that you wanna make sure that you've changed their seats. You've added this reading piece in the beginning. You've recognized right out of the gate that you had to make some adjustments. And it wasn't just about the students, it was about you recognizing that and doing it for the students to help optimize the learning time. And I do think that's huge, and you've already spoke to the fact that you've noticed a difference yourself. So the time that you might have lost at the beginning, maybe now
I think, yeah.
you can kind of make up. Because when my observation, I mean, every minute that I was in there with you was, you went right through your lesson, and other than you said you had to, the independent practice came the next day, and we met about that too, to talk about the fact that that explicit instruction went a little longer than normal, so you had to do the independent practice, but you are able to make those adjustments based on where you know you need to be with those students, so. So yeah, nothing, it sounds like you're still working with the literacy coach, it sounds like you're still using some of the graphic organizers and things as and then as you're progressing, this will all tie directly to that Holocaust unit.
Yeah, one of the things I mentioned in one of these responses too was that that lesson, that format of that mini lesson, which you would model for me last year when you were doing that coaching in there with me, that plan, I mean, if I'd had that 10 years ago, that is so, and if teachers see that and use it, I can't imagine using anything else, because it keeps me focused. I mean, it's probably, I probably script more than I need to, but it's just there,
Right.
and but it just keeps me aware of the time. In fact, even when I did that plan, I made adjustments, like I know this will take longer, so I'll shorten this one up a bit. But it does keep you focused. I just tend to have some pretty lengthy ones at times, and Tammy and I have talked about that when I have my literacy coaching with her, that, because I had done some reading of that one, I can't remember who it was or where it was, but this lady was talking about mini lessons and how she always stops hers. She has to use 2 periods.
Yeah.
And she does, and that just is how she does them because of the time. And I think that probably on some lengthier things, I just need to think that out
Think
ahead
it
of time.
through and plan it
Yep,
that
that it's
way.
gonna be 2.
Yep, and the template is meant to kind of guide teachers into thinking, what are the components of that workshop, that workshop model, the framework, and then at least knowing what needs to be included and being aware of that, then how you fill that in and to what extent, and that all can be back to what you what you prefer. But I agree, I think it does give a nice framework to get those plans down, so that we know that you're attending to all of those aspects, your whole group, your guided practice, your independent practice, and then the components that are within there.
But that does, and I mean, that really does
Yeah.
make you think about those parts.
Good.
I think later on, I mentioned, you asked about any help on anything, or any things I might need. I'm going to move into, eventually, the writing piece. It's going to be that investigative journalism. So I'm trying to integrate this as much as I can with social studies, and I mean, that's the way that kids learn, and that's my
Yeah.
firm belief in that. So I'm going to do that, and what they're going to do is come up with topics from social studies once they get into World War II, and then they'll write their investigative journalism piece over it. So it might be the Night of the Broken Glass, or whatever they find of interest.
Good. Okay.
So I might need some help, and I'll see Tammy about that as well, to get materials for some of those lower level kids.
Yep. Because they're, I mean, it's
Because they're
still,
gonna be, it's gonna be a bit of research as well, so.
right. But the classroom climate you've created, the goal-focused planning, I think the template also speaks to that. You had your learning target. It was very clear that you're managing the classroom routines and expectations. There was good rapport between the students when but with you, the attentive, there's a lot of that, your understanding of students, and of course your pedagogical and your subject knowledge, both are areas that I know that through your many years and your seasoned teacher, you definitely continue to be a learner though. You're always looking and asking and trying to figure out what's best for these students. So, and your informal assessing that you did. So I feel, from this observation, I feel that a lot went very well, and it speaks to what you've done before I ever came into that classroom. So I think that's an important thing that I just wanted to commend you on, so.
Some of the things, did you cover everything that I'd asked you to look for?
Yeah, I mean,
About the
I
kids
looked
being on
at,
task
yep,
and
the
me
mini
getting
lesson,
around.
and then your ability to circulate.
Yep.
And I know that was something that you had mentioned, and
Mhm.
I mean, when you were doing your lesson, you even kind of moved to both sides of the room to just
Mhm.
kind of while you were reading the
Okay.
book, and
Mhm.
that piece of it was, you know, something
Mhm.
that you did right out of the gate. And then when they went to their guided practice, moving around,
Mhm.
and even you said, you know, when they went to their independent practice, you picked up on some of the kids who
Mhm.
weren't able
To-
at that
yeah.
point to do that independent piece. So moving through,
Mhm.
I didn't, in the engagement, I thought, like I said, I made that a point because you asked me to,
Mhm.
and honestly, that one girl, I mean, I don't know what was going on in their minds per se, but they were
But
all, they
appearing to be.
appeared to be, you know, turned
Yeah.
appropriately, tracking the speaker, you know, those things that we look
Mhm.
for what we would say is
Mhm.
engagement. And then it sounds like through the guided practice, you really didn't have
Mhm.
to do a lot of prodding, the partners, you
No,
know.
they,
But then the independent practice,
Mhm.
you did notice
Mhm.
some of them may have checked out at some point,
Yeah.
so that was your chance to kind of get that information.
you know what else I did on that guided practice, and this could have affected some of their work. I chose like 5 different passages from books, from Holocaust books that they'll be able to
Mhm.
choose from, so that they kind of got to see the book and do a little preview of the book.
Yeah.
But I also picked them of different levels,
Mm-hmm.
and I told the kids, there's some of different levels, you each know your reading level, when you
Yeah.
pick one that you know you can read comfortably. And I'm wondering if, I've got to look to see on those, which book they chose, because I'm
Mhm.
wondering if they chose one that maybe was above them.
Okay.
One particular student, she was fine with what she chose. I mean, it was just that she wasn't listening.
Mhm.
But the other one may have chosen something
Mhm.
that was a little too difficult for them. So I haven't done it yet with my maroon group. So when I do, I really will probably pick, still give them some choice, but they're going to be of less reading,
Yep.
less text for them. to
Well,
read
and that
on.
is, I mean, depending on what you want them to do
Mhm.
with that, being
Mhm.
able to have something they can
Mhm.
read and are
Yeah.
successful with their
Mhm.
reading piece, it's gonna be, you know, more beneficial
Mhm.
and higher success rate if
Yeah.
they're able to use that reading to do the activity that
Mhm.
you want them to do, so. Good. Again, recognizing students, their abilities, what, you know,
Mhm.
and providing those levels,
Mhm.
speaks to the fact that you know that they would need that in order to have a reading that they can, work from, so. Good. Again, thank you for being my person in
Not
this,
a problem.
in this endeavor as I get going with my own understandings, and it's been a big learning curve myself, but I do feel like, you know, being able to have been in your classroom previously,
Mhm.
when I went in, you know, I kind of right out of the gate knew what I could be
you-
looking for,
mhm.
what to expect, and then started to look for some other things that you had asked me to, so I'm very fortunate to have that chance.
Thank you for your feedback too, and as I was telling you, going in there at the unscheduled visit, I really liked how I could go into Randa and look to see, and it was right there, what
Yeah.
you had typed for
Mhm.
notes. And that's something, like for all the staff members, it'll be beneficial, I think,
Yeah.
for them before they actually have the regular observation, the announced one, so.
Well, I'm usually not, I've never been known for a lack of
Words.
talking or note-taking and words, so, most
Yep.
definitely, so thank you
Okay,
again.
thank you.
Good.